Hey folks, Travis Samore from Texas again, at Travis Texin. Tonight, no hat. I'm just going to be speaking straight at you, no hat. And, I've been talking about reality awareness and transformative goals. And that transformative goal is to move from uncertainty to clarity and from fearful to determined and confident. And that's what I'm talking about. And I'm going to get into some other things tonight. But I'm always going to reference back to Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Him who strengthens me, and that's through Christ who strengthens me. So I'm going to just give me a second, and I'm going to get my outline up and touch on the topics for tonight. All right? Okay, I'm back with you. And here's the outline I use. It's going to be the same basic outline. I got about 21 items on it, but I'm going to be focusing on 9, 10, and 11. I'll show you that in just a second. Just to show you real quick who I am again, I've already mentioned the reality, awareness, transformative action, ragtag. There's my law enforcement history, and you'll notice in the middle bottom there that I did spend most of 3 years in Afghanistan working with the Afghan police in the field while I was embedded with the U.S. Army. All right, so I'm going to scroll down now. We've been going over a lot of this. Last time I talked about financial and what the situation is. Tonight I'm going to be looking at 9, 10, 11, and 12 here, okay, because they all tie together. And how to cope with food shortages, gardening, food storage, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the first things on the bottom of that hierarchy are food, shelter, food, water, and shelter, just basic survival issues. And then I'm going to touch on pets, dogs, cattle, goats, and medical support. And as I go through this, one of the background items I want to talk about, and I'm going to have another interruption here in just a moment, but what I want to talk about is Michael Yon, who's a content creator and a war correspondent. He spent a number of years as a special forces officer, soldier, and then later became a war correspondent. And one of the things he talks about is pandemic is always followed by famine, which is always followed by war. Guess what's scheduled for middle of September and October? We're supposed to have another pandemic. And believe you me, it is scheduled. It's not going to be real, but they're going to make it appear that way. I want to touch on some of that. Okay, and here that's Michael Yon in the khaki vest, and he's talking to Steve Quayle. And you see that he talks about global invasion and consequences and all that. But the basic thing he's trying to get to, he talks about the PANFA war, pandemic, famine, war. Okay, and here's another view of him. He's been traveling all over the world continuously for the last 10 or 15 years as a war correspondent. And he's been tracking the flow of immigrants up through the Darien Gap, which is part of Panama, as they come from South America, all nationalities. It's not just South Americans. It's not just Hispanics from South America, but Chinese, Africans, people from Southwest Asia. All these people are coming up, and a lot of them are military age. That's a little distraction. But you see here he's got the words famine, pandemic, and war. His PANFA war, get a couple of those words in proper order, pandemic first, then famine, and then war. He said one always follows the other. So keep that in mind as I talk about some of these things. Another thing I want to show you, and these people, when you listen to them, here's Maria Z with Mike Adams talking about tyrants and guns and everything else. But Maria Z is a journalist in Australia, a fine Christian lady. She mentions Christ in every one of her podcasts. And Mike Adams is here in Texas. Great guy, great content. And when you listen to them, they encourage people like me, little old me, and everybody to refer to each other, because my function is not I'd love to have 50,000 followers, and I've got some affiliate marketing you'll see at the bottom of my YouTube narrative. I'd love to have 50,000 followers, 100,000, and 50,000 of them buying a product every day. But the main thing is get the word out about what we're facing and what reality is. I want to separate reality from myth and give you a good, realistic understanding. I spent a lot of time out in the field in Afghanistan. I talked to villagers. I watched how they lived. And those people had no electricity. Food was always an issue. They grew a lot of their own food. When I was a little kid, and I'm 70, but when I was a little kid, my grandfather was a truck farmer, and they put up most of the food that they ate themselves. He took food, crops that he grew to the market, farmer's market, for sale, but they also kept and they put up canned or dry storage most of the food they ate. So those are the kind of things I'm going to be talking about. You've probably heard on the news, it's been on Fox News, not that I'm a big fan of Fox News, but all the main social media, mainstream media, has talked about there are predictions of a food shortage. So those are the kind of things we want to look at and talk about. And give me just a second again, and I'm going to move back to my outline. Okay, back here with the outline. And, like on food shortages, gardening, and food storage. Think, well, I've got a little garden, or I'm out in the country and I've got some land. Is it tilled? Is the ground tilled up? One of the things Mike Adams talks about is guerrilla gardening, where if you have say a brushy type piece of property, that you could just go out and plant seeds in the ground, in areas where from the air or whatever, or passersby on the roads wouldn't be able to tell you how to garden. That can work. I've grown a great crop of turnips before just throwing seed out on the ground underneath some oak trees. That can work. But if you want to be able to water it and all that, you need close to a water supply. We're in a drought right now where I'm in Texas. I haven't had hardly any rain since June, and this is September 1st. So, in those kind of conditions, if I had something planted right now, I'd have to be watering it. And I am going to plant probably within a week, and I am going to have to water. But if you plant the seeds, it's going to be 90 to 120 days. That's 3 to 4 months before you're able to pull produce off those plants. Most things you plant are minimum of 90 days before you really get production. There's some leafy vegetables you can plant like mustard, turnips. They come up, but still at least 60 days before they get up big enough where you can pull some produce off of there. And and I've already mentioned having a source for water. There are wells in the area where I live, and there are ponds, so we'll be able to get water out here in the country. But if you're living in the city, you need to, and I've talked about being a community organizer, I'm asking you to get organized. And I want to do a lot of other things in talking to people. I want to do some Zoom meetings, and I want to find someone else who will engage me and have an open dialogue. And I'd like to have an open dialogue with a lot of people who might have questions. I'm just no country boy, but I've also been halfway across the world. Besides what I saw growing up, and I was halfway raised by a truck farmer, my grandfather, besides watching that lifestyle and that way of life, I have walked among, out in the field, the Afghans, who are living very primitively. So I've got some understanding of those things. And, all of us went to college, or now I guess in high school, they talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Food, water, and shelter. Kind of basic things. On food storage, I can get into more of that later on a later podcast, but, if you grow potatoes, you can dig them up when the vines start to brown off, dig up the potatoes, and you can make racks in a dry area, put hay on it or straw, and layer them with straw. That's the way my grandfather did it, and they last for several months. Now, they won't last a year, Not in this part of Texas, it's too humid. But they'll last a long time, for several months. And every time we need potatoes, my grandmother would give me a pan or a bucket and say, go get some potatoes for supper. And go out there and get them. You can do that with some different crops. Beans, my grandmother would can some, especially the green beans, but on dried beans, you can take them and when they get completely dry on the vine, put them in a cloth sack and beat them. It's called thrashing. I actually saw thrashing of wheat in Afghanistan the old way. But, you can put them in a cloth sack like a pillowcase and thrash them. And then on a windy day, you can stand up on a bench or something. And my grandfather had a bench for this, a platform. He'd stand up on, he'd shake them out of what we called a toe sack, a burlap bag. He'd shake them out and the wind blow the chaff away. And the peas would drop down into the bucket. He'd have to do it about twice and get most of the chaff out. There's things like that you can do. Canning is important, but you got to be careful. You need to understand what you're doing. The canners themselves are a little bit dangerous. I've actually seen somebody be injured with one. But if you follow the rules on using them, you'll be okay. Pets, dogs, cats, farm animals, horses, cattle, goats, and chickens. And I kind of have it in that order for a reason. Pets, a dog is great for security. If you don't have any food to give him, he will hunt for mice, and the dog can survive pretty good as long as he's not tied up. If you let him run, a lot of times he can find his own food. Cat's the same way. If you don't feed a cat, but like once every other day or a couple of times a week, they'll still come around, but they'll be, even if you are feeding them, they're going to kill the mice and snakes and stuff around where you're living. Now, on the bigger farm animals, horses, you love them, think, I'll have transportation. Horses eat a lot. They require a lot of maintenance. You got to trim their hooves. Can you trim their hooves? Can you take care of their feet? Those big animals can be a problem. And can you feed them? If we have a food shortage or an economic collapse that, everybody's looking at the World Economic Forum, the central bank digital currency and all that, and how it's going to affect our economies. If what we all can't work, there's no work, you can't get money, shoot the feed store. If the transportation collapses, the feed store's not going to have any feed. So these big animals like horses and cows, unless you're on a big property, that you might as well start eating them. But the cattle, how many people in your family can only eat so many ounces of meat? Unless you can kill them and can it or have some way to store that food without refrigeration, you're going to be in trouble. Goats and chickens are much more practical. In Afghanistan, there was a little local market down the hill from Frog Tillman on what we call the wadi. The two wadis came together, and then the point of that triangle, there was a little shop down there, and they would kill a goat every third day, hang it up, skin it out, hang it up, and if somebody came by and had a little money or something to trade, they'd cut off some of that meat and give it to them. A lot of these people would just get, 8, 10 ounces, a pound or two of meat off that goat. And, so that goat fed several people or several families. Chickens are practical. Besides eating chickens, they're laying eggs if you got the hens, and you got to protect them. But with the chickens, they're laying eggs, and the eggs have pretty good protein. There's a lot of vitamins and everything in eggs. So that's some good stuff to look at. I don't know if I can switch over. I'll get over here. I looked up eggs a while ago, and one egg has 72 calories in it, 6 grams of protein. So, like, if you want to have 1,500 calories a day, you're going to have to eat a lot of eggs. But, how many chicken? If you have some, at least you can have some good protein. They've got other minerals, iron, vitamins, minerals, and carotenoids, or whatever those are. but they've got a lot of stuff in them that's good for you. So, keep those kind of things in mind. Let me get back to my outline here. So goats and chickens are the most practical animals to have. If you got a cute little fluffy dog, I won't get into anything gross, but if they're very difficult to keep alive for a long time without proper food and veterinary care, and none of that's going to be happening if we have some social collapse. So, and then medical support, supplies, and alternative survival medication. I've got a link that'll be on my YouTube video page for this, Jace Medical, and they sell medicine. Okay, they don't sell bandages and all that, but medicine that you might want to have in case there was one of these planned pandemics happens, or you're just having regular medical issues, and you can't get to town. The gas stations are closed. In that kind of environment, you need to have a fair amount of medical supplies on hand, several months worth. So think about that. I've got some medicine supplies for me. I'm essentially diabetic, but if I'm not able to buy cookies, I'm not going to have a problem with my blood sugar. And if I'm just eating protein, I'm going to be okay. There's a lot of these things to consider. Just think about that. So going from top to bottom again, on food, learn about how, and I'll add some more videos on this on like wilderness survival. My wife actually was an outfitter up in Colorado for a number of years and would teach that to folks she was taking up for week-long hunting trips up in the mountains. They had people getting injured because of falls and those kind of things, and but just basic survival in the wilderness. Part of that includes food storage. What predators do you have? In my part of Texas, we have coyotes and bobcats. There are some cougars floating around, and raccoons. And raccoons will get into things as much as anybody else, even more so than like coyotes. But, if you're going to store food, you got to have practical ways to do that. Your pets and everything. If you get real worried about your little fluffy dog and there's no grocery stores open and there's 10,000 people coming by your house every day looking for food, here's a tissue when it comes to your puppy. Get real. And but cattle, you can get milk, but how are you going to be able to feed them? Goats, you can get milk from goats and meat. I think they can have breed like twice a year and have kids a couple of times a year. And so depending on how many you have, chickens, my wife and I have 6 or 7 hens. That's enough eggs just for the 2 of us. Not every chicken lays an egg every day. They have processes they go through the year called molting, and while they're molting, they don't lay very well. I've only had 100% production day in the last month. I'm normally 1 or 2 of my hens won't lay. And then if they get scared or something, I had a possum come up one night. I didn't get very many eggs the next day. Things like that. And then, like I said, on the medical, make sure you've got medicine for whatever issues you think you might face. I spent some time in Panama a few years ago and got some food. I drank some contaminated water at a restaurant. And if I had not had the strongest medicine available for that with me in my cabin, I was in trouble, big trouble. And I needed that medicine to make it. So, those are things you need to think about. I want to mention one other thing. If you want to kind of see what's really happening around the world right now, right this minute, you need to take a look at the Free Burma Rangers. And I'll have a link to their website is, I think it's freeburmarangers.org. But it's a Christian mission that's operating in Burma. They teach combat first aid, combat lifesaver courses, and they've been there for a long time. They've been there for like 20 years, and they operated in and out of Burma. They worked in Iraq and I think Afghanistan, but I know they were in Iraq, and they've been there helping people. They're helping Afghans now through like Tajikistan, but they teach combat first aid so that as these guys are being decimated by the Burmese government, they can provide medical care. But one of the things you'll see in that is people living with almost nothing. And it's a real check on reality. So take a look at the Free Burma Ranger link that'll be on this site. We want to post it. And it'll give you a taste of reality. And that's happening every day right now. Okay? So God bless you guys. And I also want to mention, I do want to hook up with some people. I don't care, man or woman, and even a younger. I'd like to have someone younger, so you're not looking at an old man sitting here. Someone younger who will engage with me in a discussion, in an active dialogue about these kind of issues, what their perspective is as a younger person, what they see, and how to get some younger people to wake up and see what's going on. This stuff's real. And it's happening. And on the political side, get involved with your local county Republican club. The Republican committees are the ones that run the mechanics of the voting in the elections and all that. The Republican clubs are more of a mix and mingle group, and they try to encourage each other to be influencers with the state legislators and U.S. reps. But get involved. Even if you don't want to be like an officer or something, just go sit and listen. And we need some younger people to step up. College guys are taking political science or whatever, need to come to some of these like Republican club meetings, sit in and listen and see what's going on and get involved. You'll be welcome. And I need somebody, I'm going to find somebody to have a dialogue with, so you're not just listening to me go over these 21 topics, and have some engagement. And I look forward to setting up a Zoom meeting. We can have the chat and respond to the chat and get as many people in on the phone as we can. But just more good stuff to look forward to. Next time I'll talk about fuel shortages and more on community organizing. So you guys take care, and